So welcome again to another segment that's featuring Rob Kall, who's a sort of a personal hero and legend in the biofeedback community, in my opinion. He's done a million great interviews that I've listened to on future health, one of his aspects of his career that really informed me a lot. And he's an inventor, interviewer, activist. He has a bottom-up view of change, and writer, publisher, and a truly Renaissance man, and someone who taught many people many things over the years. And I think hopefully you'll also learn from him. And so the first question, Rob, welcome. And would you like to introduce yourself as well? Or was that okay? I know.
Well, it was a very kind introduction. The one thing you left out is I wrote a book, Bottom Up Revolution, and then I co-edited a book, Biofeedback, which was basically a book published in Russian and English in Russia.
Oh wow, that's awesome! You've done so much stuff. I can relate to that diverse lifestyle. And are you still involved with biofeedback, and how did you get into it in the beginning?
Well, I got into it when I was at Penn State University as an undergraduate, and it just intrigued me. I had learned a little bit about meditation, and I saw biofeedback as a technological way to help people develop the same kind of self-regulation skills without having the issue of it being, some people were saying that meditation was anti-religion or of the devil and things like that. Of course, later on, people said that of biofeedback too. But that was my thought, that biofeedback was a cool technological way to help people to learn how to develop greater self-control over themselves and greater self-mastery.
Wow. So have you been working as a practitioner also during this time, or mostly in these other areas?
Well, I was an undergraduate student then, and my first work was with EEG in 1971, I would say.
Wow.
And then I got into working with EMG and temperature biofeedback as well, and I started working with a physician under his supervision after I graduated.
I see. And what about HRV? Were you into that as well, or?
Well, for a while, I don't do biofeedback, and I haven't done it in a long time. I kind of transitioned out of the field in, I guess, 2006, 2007.
I see.
And when I was seeing patients, which was, I would say, mostly before 2000. I started in biofeedback over 50 years ago.
Wow.
And I was a kid at the time. Just about. I was 19 to 20 years old. But I mainly did work with peripheral biofeedback and some work with EEG biofeedback. And then I got into the EEG. I saw a whole bunch of people teaching introductory courses on EEG. So I started my Winter Brain Conference, which was a place where the people who were teaching the introductory courses could present to each other on more advanced ideas and thinking without having to explain the basics.
Yeah, I've heard longtime practitioners talk about how awesome those conferences were. So did that go on for a long time, or was that
15 years.
15 years, wow. That's amazing. And so you must know everyone in the field. Did you ever get a chance to meet like Elmer Green and that generation, or he was...
I always kind of thought of Elmer Green as a mentor. We talk periodically, and he was quite an exceptional guy. It's been a couple years since I've been to an AAPB or SNR meeting, but I I was invited a couple times to teach the history of the field of biofeedback because I got to know an awful lot of the pioneers in the field, from Barbara Brown to Tom Budzinski and Johann Stoive and John Bosmajian.
Right. And over all of those meetings and what you've learned, just to cut to the chase, what can you tell people who listen to this, particularly people who don't have funds, to buy the heavy-duty machinery, of what you believe, what you've gleaned over this time that might help them in these, sort of crazy yet interesting times?
Well, I actually, once I left the field of biofeedback, I got into lefty politics, basically, and I actually hired a polling company to do some polling. Actually, and I did the polling before I had left biofeedback, so I actually got some funding from some of the biofeedback companies, J&J Instruments and Thought Technology, and Tom Kalura, the Brainmaster. They each helped to pony up some money to help pay for the funding. And what I asked was questions to get an idea of who would be responsive to biofeedback or the ideas of biofeedback. And what I was surprised to discover was that conservatives tended to be more interested in the idea of taking self-responsibility for their health. Now, that poll was done in about 2004, 2005. If you look at it in terms of the recent history of conservatives and them not wanting to get vaccinations and what have you regarding COVID, it makes even more sense now.
Right.
So if you're a biofeedback practitioner, offering the concept of taking control of your own health and not depending completely upon physicians or doctors is an attractive thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, I think of it as a bottom-up, healthcare aspect anyways, one of them. That's how I look at it, self-regulation. Didn't they at one point plan on calling it self-regulation instead of biofeedback even?
Well, the journal, I don't know what they call it now, but at one time the name of the journal, the Biofeedback Journal, was Biofeedback and Self-Regulation.
I see. Interesting. Wow. So do you do it personally? Have you done it for all these years, or?
Well, the idea of biofeedback is you learn how to do it, and then you don't need the equipment anymore. And yes, I do. And actually, I tend to use the respiratory self-regulation more than anything else. That and for me, facial muscle relaxation. Part of the material that I presented a number of times at biofeedback conferences, at the AABT Behavior Therapy Conference, and pain conferences, was my work on emotional self-regulation. I was doing what is basically now called positive psychology in the mid-'80s.
Right.
And part of that was using EMG, surface EMG biofeedback to help people to learn to have stronger, more vibrant smiles.
That's
and
awesome.
So I would hook up the EMG electrodes to their zygomaticus muscle, and I conceptualized that the frontalis placement over the forehead is not only a frontalis placement, but it's also a corrugator placement. And I learned from my digging up research that Paul Fair, who worked with John Bosmajian at Emory University, Bosmajian was one of the earliest of the pioneers in biofeedback. Paul Fair had done studies where he found that depressed people had extra strong corrugator muscles, and non-depressed people had stronger zygomatic smile muscles. So I worked with people, and it was amazing to really see the kind of results that could be done. I would tell people to smile as strong as they could, and they would grimace, making artificially trying to raise their smile muscles.
Right.
And then I'd tell them to relax, and then I'd say, okay, and I'd tell them a joke, and they would laugh, and the muscle activity was 2 or 3 times greater, and which was fascinating to me because it was kind of like people who have had some kind of a stroke where they can't talk but they can sing.
Yeah.
And so I thought that this was a kind of a psychomotor retardation of their smiling, really. So I really feel that biofeedback is something that can be used to help so many people. And it's sad that it doesn't fit with the medical model where, people go to the doctor now and they expect to get a medication.
Right.
Now, I don't like that. My doctor just retired. My GP just retired, and I have to find a new GP. And so I'm going to be interviewing people. And, what I don't want is somebody who says, well, you need to go on this medication, because I don't want to do that, because of my attitude that I've acquired over the years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, it's...
I want to take care of my own health.
Yeah, I mean, that's the goal for I think a lot of people in biofeedback. It seems sort of a split between people who feel like the way you do, and I also believe that, but then there's other people that just want to plug you in and turn on the machines. And so I've noticed when I was doing the NRBS job that there seemed to be this interesting split between sort of technologically inclined and more humanistic, positive psychology, quote, alternative, complementary people. And they didn't all get along, so I was happy when that gig ended. But so in your own use of it, it sounds like smile biofeedback might be a potential future subject for somebody to go into, maybe along with laughing yoga, another sort of unsung health care idea of laughter along with smiling as a remedy for a lot of things. And I love the way your whole bottom-up philosophy of growing things from the ground up. When I moved, I live in Florida now, and because of the PR that came with making the sites online, I was contacted by the Science Museum down here to do a lecture once a month. They had like a Smarty lecture, and they asked me to talk about the cutting edge technology of biofeedback, and they sadly named it Mind Over Matter, which I wasn't too happy about, but it was, for biofeedback, it was a pretty big moment for me anyways, and the whole point of my lecture was to teach people there that they could do biofeedback even without the machinery. So I've been really interested in, how to help people that aren't just the people with money that can afford the fancy machinery. And I think it can be done, and part of the mission of this this broadcast is to bring out those ideas for everyone. I've just done a few of them so far. Ina Kazan and Jerry Fee, who studied with Les Femi, and then Harry Campbell, who's more on the equipment side, but knows a lot. And everyone seems to have really deep knowledge, from a different angle, which makes it so interesting. But you're right. The revolution has not come yet in biofeedback. So tell me.
I'm glad you mentioned Les Femi. Les Femi was one of the first pioneers in the field who I met in the early 70s. And, his basic concept is open focus. And when it comes to bottom up, if there's one single message that I want to get across with bottom up is it's a way of seeing the world where you have what I call connection consciousness. And that means that you're conscious of how you're connected to everyone else around you. And one of the big problems that people come to biofeedback for is stress or pain.
Yeah.
And basically, both of those are consciousness. They cause you to narrow your focus. And so what Les Femi did, was wonderful, really, helping people to open their focus and feel more and more aware of everything within them and around them.
Yeah, he was amazing. I learned open focus when I was 15. I'm 62 now, and I've been doing it all these years, and I feel like it's helped me a lot, and I'm sad that I didn't get a chance to interview him because I started this after, he just recently passed.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to ask Jim Robbins, who did the books with him, to talk about open focus more. Cause,
he would always teach the courses. Like, he was a regular every year at my conference for all 15 years that I ran my conference, the Winter Brain Conference.
Wow.
And he always did it with his wife, Susan Femi. So I would definitely recommend that you contact her. She's carrying his work.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. I asked Jim Robbins to write a piece about Les Femi, for the groups, which he kindly did. It was really nice and, very heartfelt. So that's a good idea. I'll reach out to her and, see if she can add to this conversation. Because I first learned about it, I thought I was watching Dr. Frankenstein. I had a bus stop next to a window where a woman had all those crazy machines, and eventually my curiosity got the best of me, so I walked inside, and before I knew it, she hooked me up, and for a year I had to take this bus, and I would spend a little time watching her heal one person after another, mostly with migraine and headache issues. And I used to get pretty bad headaches, maybe not too often, but once a week or a couple times a month. And I learned it. I don't think I've had 5 headaches my whole life since then. So I have a lot of respect for, the power that biofeedback can offer people. And, Jerry Fee, who taught me, she's still working. She's in her upper 80s now, I believe. And she has been working for a neurology group in Bergen County for all these years, helping people using open focus with adjustments to medications and, stress and all the various neurological issues that and it's fascinating because it's just one method and there's so many. It's confusing to me often because people come at it from these very different ideas, and I'm always curious what each person like you thinks is the most useful for other people. So besides open focus, do you have sort of favorites that you would recommend, say someone suffering from the craziness of our current world to go to that you like to recommend to people?
Well, I got into my work with what I consider positive psychology because I worked with Keith Sidlachik. He's a psychiatrist who had a practice in New York City, and we were working together. We came up with a relaxation exercise, an audio that had like integrated a half a dozen different kinds of relaxation techniques. Muscle relaxation, autogenic imagery, which Schultz and Luthi had developed, and the quieting reflex, which was developed by Chuck Strobel, who died pretty young. But in the quieting reflex, it had a thing where it told people to smile, and we went from that to smile and connect that with a heartwarming feeling in your chest, and then let the warmth flow into your hands like an autogenic approach. And what really blew my mind was when I hooked up my patients at the time, and I had them do that imagery, and they were able to imagine a heartwarming experience. It got all their physiology going in the right direction. So that led me to believe that that heartwarming experiences were very powerful things, then imagery of them was very powerful. The other aspect of imagery that was widely used back then was, think about being on a beach and relaxing, something like that. But what I learned from my work was that if I asked people to think of a heartwarming experience, they wouldn't always think of heartwarming experiences, but they would think of positive experiences. And what I put together from the imagery research that had been out there was that what they needed to do was come up with very specific instances and experiences. So I encouraged people to start keeping a positive experience diary. Since then, people have called those gratitude diaries.
Right.
Because they're basically notes about positive experiences that they've had. And a positive experience can be doing something that you did with your kid that your parents did with you, or your grandparents did with you, or watching your kids sleep, or it could be cleaning out and organizing a drawer, or finally signing the papers on a divorce. I mean, there are all kinds of different positive experiences, including recovery from adverse situations.
Yeah,
but my belief is that positive experiences are the basic building blocks of your ability to be happy, to be in loving relationships, to face adversity, to face stress. They're the core. If you've got them in your head and in your heart, so they are the filters through which you see the world, you're going to be stronger. And you're going to have more ability to embrace new opportunities and new possibilities, and to let go so that you can open yourself up to some of the risks that come with love and having positive and happy experiences.
I agree. That's great advice, and it seems to me HeartMath, is sort of built on this idea of the heartwarming experience, and even though they measure it with technology, I don't think it necessarily needs that. And I was interested that Jerry Fee, who I mentioned, she told me she uses the equipment now as more of like a scale where she checks in with the equipment, which I found fascinating. She no longer uses it as the traditional biofeedback method, but rather on occasion to sort of look at their physiology. And, I think that's one interesting way that biofeedback can develop in the idea of self-regulation, and as far as gratitude and positive thinking, I always look at those as sort of the natural antidepressant. When I teach people, I have them sort of list all the potentially positive things. I have a window, I have a crust of bread, whatever it is, that no matter how small, and the goal I always feel is to get to that heartfelt place. But a lot of people, they don't feel it, and so it becomes more of an exercise with the goal of getting to that feeling. And if they learn how to do it, then they could sort of maintain it, and then you could, measure it, or just, if they can afford the devices, then they will buy those and use them. And now, fascinatingly, they're developing these things in a remote way, in a big way, and I think that's really exciting because it'll sort of globalize what people have done in offices, until recently. Although I guess you would probably know, I assume some people were able to use distance biofeedback going back a bit.
But the thing is, biofeedback is not successful unless the person develops the self-regulation skills so they no longer need the equipment. And one of the reasons that I think that biofeedback technology is helpful is because as people are beginning to develop the self-regulation skills, they may not feel the change that is causing them to be better, to feel better. But if you have the biofeedback equipment, you can show via the measurements of whatever physiological parameter you're measuring that they are making progress. They're going up or down a half a microvolt or a microvolt, or they're raising their finger temperature a little bit, or they're changing their percentage of alpha or theta or whatever, so that the instrumentation helps them to see progress before they feel progress.
Yeah, no, I agree that's true. It's just that a lot of people can't afford this, and so because of that, I'm always trying to find workarounds. And I hear what you're saying.
Are you talking about patients going to biofeedback practitioners, or are you talking about people trying to adapt?
Mostly I'm focusing in on biofeedback as a form of self-regulation, and, that self-regulation, I think of the equipment as sort of a magnifying glass that shows people, and it has the operant conditioning, so you get the reward, to encourage you. But I think that some of these things can be done with, like the equipment you invented, or things that don't cost that much, or sometimes even free, as in the case of breath biofeedback, which I feel that people get a reward when they calm down, and so it has that sort of biofeedback loop.
And I would say that for me, I'm mostly what I do now is breath regulation. I used HRV biofeedback to kind of learn the skill and master it, but I don't need to use the technology anymore. It's really simple. I do count of 6 in, pause, count of 6 out, and I use that, and it's incredibly powerful. I mean, the breath is such a powerful part of who we are. We do it constantly, and so it's a big deal. And it's so simple, but simple is not easy necessarily. And that's one of the challenges of biofeedback. It is very simple, but it takes practice to learn how to do it.
Yeah, I think of that as the paradox of biofeedback. On the one hand, you're teaching people to open their focus and relax, but on the other hand, they're looking at themselves, and so they get self-conscious, and you have to tell them, forget about the measurements while they're being measured. So it always sort of creates this almost ironic situation where people want to learn these skills, but then they get more stressed looking at it. So, oops, sorry, that was our half-hour button. But if you need to go, it's fine. If you want to talk a few more minutes, I would love it. But
I've got a couple more minutes.
Oh, okay, thanks. So, and interestingly, I am also a big lover of positive psychology. My undergrad was in Bachelor of Arts in Psychology for Humanistic Psychology at William Patterson, back when they had programs like that. It turned into a behavioral program my final year, so I dropped out because I hated it so much. So it's interesting that later in life, I found the value of measurement and quantifying everything. But back then, I didn't want to hear about that sort of, idea. And also what you were saying about, different theories coming back. It seems to me a lot of theories in psychology are sort of recycled, from older theories. And, biofeedback and behaviorism are connected, but there's also a lot of humanists in, doing biofeedback.
Well, let me throw something at you. I got into positive psychology before it was called positive psychology. I gave my first talk on it, calling it positive emotional self-regulation, about 1985. And my basic concept was the entire field of clinical psychology was aimed at diagnosing and fixing and eliminating pathology, period. That's what it was. And it's a good thing to do that. But what I started questioning was, is it possible to help people by teaching them to develop positive skills that would lift them. And I now that is a whole field.
Right.
But back then it was a question, and I always felt that psychopathology and the assessment of it and the treatment of it was an important thing. But I also felt that it was very important to also offer people teaching of skills that they could use that would help to free themselves and lift themselves above it. And so I think that is a way to present biofeedback. Biofeedback teaches you to become a better you. It teaches you to develop more awareness and more self-regulation skills over your own self.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
It's you must have done massive amounts of thinking on this subject, and it's interesting that you sort of saw ahead of time what was to become, positive psychology, and and that's the problem with medicine that you just mentioned. My best friend he's a forensic psychiatrist, and he just retired, but when he first became a doctor, I was in awe that he could become a doctor, and I remember asking him, how could you, take the responsibility of someone's life all the time? He was working in an emergency room, and he told me, oh, it's really no big deal. It's just about memorizing a 3,000 or 5,000 maybe page book called like Black something, and someone presents a problem and you go like page 372 and page 33 and solution page, and that's how they were trained. And I don't know if it's still like that, but I have a suspicion it's, slowly changing, hopefully. But it needs to grow into more of a positive psychology and what is health, and, not just pathology like you were saying. So
well, I think that one of the roles, I had a misunderstanding. I thought you were mostly addressing practitioners, but I'm thrilled that you're not.
Yeah.
Because really, one of the things that you have to think about is if the pharmaceutical industry could get its way, every single person would be diagnosed with some pathology of some kind and put on a medication.
Yeah.
Now, if you don't want to do that, then you need to really educate yourself, because most of the doctors are trained in that model. They're trained in identifying pathology and treating the pathology, most often with drugs or surgery. Right. I think that what we have to offer in the world of biofeedback is an alternative where people hold on to their power, hold on to their ability to control their health on their own. And the tools are really simple, and a lot of them are very inexpensive. And even if you end up needing to go to somebody, it's for a limited time. It's never something you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I think that it can really make a big difference in their lives by learning the ideas of self-regulation and really increasing their consciousness of who they are, how their body works, and how their physiology works.
Yeah, we're on the same page. I like to think that progress, is going to happen, and it's inevitable because it's obvious that that's a much smarter version of, if limiting costs and all the things that society, says they want. So it doesn't really make sense or it's not affordable to keep going the way we've been going. So I do notice a bit of a shift, but it definitely has a long way to go. And, hopefully there will be a biofeedback revolution in self-care, because it's sort of crazy the way it is right now.
One of the challenges is learning self-regulation through biofeedback. It takes some extra work. It's simpler and easier to get a prescription and start taking pills.
Right.
You actually have to learn a skill, and it's like practice. it's like a sport. You know, I've gotten into gardening because I love to grow my own food to eat, and that takes time, and it takes regular daily effort on my part to water the plants and to weed and what have you. And you know, people have to decide that they are worth it. It's worth giving the time, putting in the time so that they can take control of their health and not hand it over to some doctor or pharmaceutical company.
That's interesting. And, so more like an investment in ourselves and our futures, really, you know, is what you're saying, and that makes a lot of sense. You know, you have to give up something to do that. So now, in terms of future practitioners, what would you like to tell them that you've learned over the years that you might offer to help them when they help other people? Can you think of anything that would be useful for people that, you know, maybe they're just graduated from Penn University and they learn mindfulness and they are getting into biofeedback now, but they don't have that, you know, experience that someone like you has? What would you advise them?
Find other connection consciousness. Let's go back to that. Mm-hmm. Find other people who believe the same kind of ideas. Find physicians, find clinics, find other psychologists or practitioners who think the same as you, and network with them, and that will make it a lot easier to build a practice, I think.
Yeah, that's great advice, and you know, hopefully there'll be a lot of wisdom for them to learn from in recordings like yours on your futurehealth.org site, which I've listened to many of your interviews and learned so much from different people. It's really amazing the work you do and you did. And I actually, you know, I like that old saying that the politics is personal, and really nothing is more personal than our health. So, you know, in a way, you've continued your work, even though it might be more about the overt politics. You know, to me, they intersect always. And so,
well, I'll tell you, I kind of see the continuity of my work in that, in working with biofeedback, part of my goal was to wake people up and to increase their awareness of what they could do and the power that they had. And I went into working as a journalist and a publisher within progressive politics because I felt I could reach more people and empower more people that way. But still, it was about awakening people. So I kind of see my work as being an awakener.
Oh, that's really cool. That's interesting. I hope they wake up more, because it doesn't
we really need it.
We really need it. Does Bernie have a child? Or thank you so much, Rob. You've been as awesome as I imagined, and I appreciate your wisdom and all the information that you put out, and that's on your futurehealth.org site and op-ed news.
So my other sites, the other sites that people can check out of mine is robkall.com, ROBKALL.com, and my political site is opednews.com. I have positivepsychology.net.
Wow, that's a good one. Wow.
And I haven't really even talked. I mean, this weekend I'm giving 2 workshops at the Story Expo conference because I got into the world of story, which I ran a conference on for 6 years. And really, the stories we tell ourselves, really that's what a lot of psychotherapy is about, is reconstructing our narratives and our stories. But that's another conversation.
No, I hear that. I belong to the Columbia University Narrative Medicine group on Facebook, and I had to talk my way in. But I really believe it's true. You know, what did Napoleon Hill, the self-help guy, say? What we conceive and believe we can achieve, something like that. It is the stories that we tell ourselves, and that's, in a way the root of healing everything. So thank you again, Rob, for your time, and I appreciate your generosity. Thank you.
Well, you're doing good work there. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Okay, and I'll disconnect now.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Rob.